I've driven Highway 101 dozens of times before, but this night taught me one terrifying rule. If a stranger stops you on a foggy highway, you might not survive the decision you make next. I used to believe that the most dangerous thing on an empty highway was falling asleep at the wheel. I was wrong. The real danger isn't exhaustion. It isn't the fog. It's the moment you realize that someone else has already noticed how alone you are, and they're counting on it. That night taught me a rule I will never break again. If a stranger stops you on a fog-covered highway and calmly asks you to follow them, whatever choice you make next could be the last safe decision of your life. Before we continue, if you enjoy real chilling stories like this, stories that could happen to anyone, consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps keep these stories coming, and you never know when one of them might save you from making the wrong decision on the road. It was 1:17 a.m. on a Tuesday night in early March when I left my friend's house in Portland. The kind of night where you're tired, but not tired enough to think you're in danger. I'd stayed longer than I planned, talking about work, life, the usual things people say when they don't want the night to end. By the time I got into my car, my body ached for sleep, but my mind still felt sharp enough to drive. Highway 101 was nearly empty, stretching along the Oregon coast like a dark ribbon hugging the edge of the world. I'd driven this route dozens of times before. It was familiar, predictable. That sense of familiarity made me careless, something I wouldn't realize until much later. About 15 minutes into the drive, the fog started to roll in. At first it was light, barely noticeable, drifting in from the Pacific like thin smoke. I turned the music up, hoping it would keep me alert, and continued at the same speed. But within minutes, the fog thickened rapidly, swallowing the road ahead in heavy, shifting waves. My headlights seemed useless, cutting only a few feet into the gray before disappearing completely. I slowed down instinctively, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. The world around me went unnaturally quiet. The sound of the ocean vanished. Even the hum of my tires felt muted, as if the fog itself was absorbing every noise. I rolled my window down slightly, half expecting to hear something, wind, waves, anything. But there was nothing, just silence. That's when I realized how isolated I truly was. No cars behind me, no headlights ahead, no service bars on my phone. I turned the music off completely, needing to focus. The road markings faded in and out of view, appearing only when I was almost on top of them. I dropped my speed to 10 miles per hour, leaning forward in my seat, squinting into the fog like that might somehow help me see farther. And then, without warning, something dark appeared directly in front of me. I slammed on the brakes. My car skidded to a stop just feet from a black sedan sitting half in my lane, half on the shoulder. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. The sedan's brake lights glowed red through the fog, steady and unmoving. No hazard lights, no movement, just waiting. I sat there frozen, my foot pressed hard against the brake pedal, trying to understand why anyone would stop like that in zero visibility. My first thought was that the driver had crashed or passed out. My second thought was that I should reverse and get away from it. Before I could move, the sedan's engine revved softly. The car crept forward, slowly rolling completely onto the shoulder. The driver's side window slid down and a gloved hand emerged, gesturing calmly for me to pull forward and pass. The gesture was unhurried, confident, patient. That should have terrified me more than it did. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to keep my distance. but the rational part of my brain tried to explain it away. Maybe they'd almost caused an accident and were signaling me through. Maybe they were lost too. The fog was bad enough to make anyone act strangely. I eased forward, passing the sedan at a cautious crawl. As I did, I glanced sideways. I used to believe that doing the right thing would protect me. I was raised to help people, to stop when someone needed assistance, to never drive past a person in trouble and pretend I didn't see them. For most of my life, that belief defined who I was. It shaped my career, my relationships, and the way I saw the world. That belief almost got me killed. It was 3:28 a.m. when I started my drive home from the hospital. Another overnight shift during the pandemic had left me exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. My body felt hollow, like I was running on borrowed energy, but my mind was still wired from 12 straight hours of alarms, overhead pages, and fluorescent lights. The Taconic State Parkway stretched ahead of me, winding through long corridors of trees in upstate New York. At that hour, it felt less like a road and more like a forgotten tunnel cutting through the forest. No traffic, no police cruisers, just darkness and asphalt. I'd driven this route hundreds of times. Normally, the familiarity comforted me. That night, it only made everything feel eerier. The pandemic had stripped the world of its background noise. Even highways had grown quiet. I passed mile after mile without seeing another set of headlights. My phone sat in the cup holder beside me, face down, battery low. I remember thinking I just needed to stay awake a little longer. That's when the fog rolled in. Not slowly, not gradually. One moment the road was clear, the next it felt like I'd driven into a cloud. The trees vanished, the lines on the pavement blurred. My headlights reflected back at me in pale white streaks. I slowed down, heart sinking. Then I saw the red lights, hazard lights flashing weakly through the fog, pulsing like a distress signal. A black sedan sat pulled off on the shoulder, barely visible except for the rhythmic glow of red. I eased off the gas, my instincts immediately at war with each other. I was tired. I was alone. But someone might need help. As a nurse, ignoring that thought felt impossible. I pulled over several car lengths ahead of the sedan, leaving my engine running. For a moment, I just sat there, hands gripping the wheel, scanning the fog for movement. The road behind me remained empty. No approaching headlights, no sound except my own breathing. I stepped out of the car. The cold air cut through my scrubs instantly. The fog pressed in from every direction, muffling sound and distorting distance. As I walked back toward the sedan, I noticed a man standing beside it near the open hood. He wore a black face covering, the kind people had started wearing everywhere during the pandemic. Only his eyes were visible. "Hey," I called out cautiously. "You okay?" He turned toward me, raising one hand in greeting. "Yeah, sorry, battery's dead. Phone died too," he said quickly. His voice was tight, rushed. "My wife's just a few minutes away. I just need to call her." I glanced at the car. The hood was up, but nothing looked obviously wrong. No smoke, no steam, no signs of trouble. Something about that bothered me. Still, I nodded. "Okay, just be careful, the road's slick." "Thank you," he said and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was wide, stretched too far across his face like he was trying too hard to look normal. I pulled my phone from my pocket and unlocked it, stepping closer so he could hear. The moment I handed it to him, a strange unease settled in my chest. The kind you feel when you realize you've crossed a line you can't uncross. He walked a few steps away, turning his back to me. I stayed near the sedan, my eyes drifting over the interior through the open driver's door. That's when I noticed the keys. They were still in the ignition. The dashboard lights were on. The radio glowed faintly. If the battery was dead, none of that should have worked. My pulse quickened. I took a step closer and leaned inside. The car smelled wrong. Stale cigarette smoke mixed with something sour and unwashed. The kind of smell that clings to enclosed spaces where people spend too much time. I slid into the driver's seat, my heart pounding now. The engine started instantly. Cold dread flooded my chest. This wasn't a broken down car. Before I could react, the passenger door behind me flew open. Arms wrapped around my neck from the back seat, crushing my airway in an instant. The force slammed me against the seat as fingers dug into my throat. I gasped, clawing at the hands, my vision blurring as panic surged. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The world narrowed to pressure and darkness. My heart hammered violently as I kicked my legs, twisting my body, trying to reach the door handle. The grip tightened. My lungs burned. Outside the car, I heard the man's voice. "Hold her." In that moment, training took over. I drove my elbow backward with everything I had. It connected with something soft. The grip loosened just enough. I sucked in a desperate breath and threw my weight sideways, fingers scraping against the door handle. The door flew open. I tumbled out onto the pavement, air tearing into my lungs. I didn't stop to look back. I ran. My legs felt weak, but fear pushed me forward. Gravel cut into my shoes as footsteps thundered behind me. I reached my car, yanked the door open, and slammed it shut, locking it just as a shadow lunged at the window. The engine roared to life. As I hit the gas, a deafening crack shattered the night. Pain exploded in my shoulder as glass burst inward. I screamed, swerving wildly, but I didn't stop. I didn't slow down until I reached my apartment nearly 30 miles away. When I finally called the police, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. That was when I realized my phone was gone. Not just gone, compromised. By the time authorities traced what they could, my bank accounts had been emptied, my personal information stolen, even my home address. A week later, my parents heard footsteps in the backyard late at night. The gate stood open when they turned on the lights. They knew where I lived. I still help people. But I no longer stop on empty roads because sometimes the most dangerous mistake you can make isn't being careless. It's being kind without limits. By the time this happened, I had already been on the road for over 12 hours. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I'd driven longer stretches before, that I just needed coffee, music, and a few more hours of focus. Looking back, I realized that confidence was exactly what made me vulnerable. It was 1:32 a.m. when I crossed into Wyoming, heading west along Interstate 80 towards Salt Lake City. The landscape changed almost immediately. The lights thinned out, the towns disappeared. What replaced them was a vast, empty darkness that felt less like a place and more like an absence of everything familiar. There were no streetlights, no buildings, no sound except the steady hum of tires against pavement and the low whistle of wind slipping around my car. The kind of silence that makes you feel exposed. I rolled the window down slightly, letting the cold air sting my face, hoping it would keep me awake. My eyes burned from exhaustion and my shoulders ached from gripping the steering wheel for too long. I checked the clock again and told myself I was almost there, just a little farther. That's when I noticed the headlights. They appeared suddenly in my rearview mirror, bright and close, too close. At first, I assumed it was just another driver coming up fast, someone eager to pass on the empty highway. I flicked my eyes to the speedometer. 75 miles per hour. The headlights didn't move. Seconds passed, then a minute. The vehicle stayed right behind me, maintaining a steady distance that felt intentional. The beams filled my mirrors, washing the interior of my car in harsh white light. I sped up slightly, so did they. My stomach tightened. I moved into the right lane, signaling clearly, expecting them to pass. The headlights followed me over, staying locked in place. No attempt to go around, no change in speed. That's when I knew something was wrong. I accelerated again, pushing past 80. The road ahead stretched endlessly into darkness, straight and empty. The car behind me didn't back off. Instead, it crept closer, the headlights growing brighter, more aggressive. I glanced back and finally caught a glimpse of the vehicle. An old Ford pickup truck. Rusted, beat up. The kind of truck you'd expect to see abandoned in a field, not barreling down the interstate in the middle of the night. It stayed glued to my rear bumper. My heart began to race. I told myself to stay calm, to think rationally. Maybe the driver was drunk. Maybe they were trying to intimidate me into speeding. I checked the mirrors again. No other cars, no exits in sight. I changed lanes abruptly. The truck mirrored me instantly. The realization hit hard and fast. This wasn't coincidence. I pushed the accelerator down further, hitting 90. The road signs blurred as they flew past. My hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. The truck pulled alongside me, matching my speed perfectly. For a few seconds, we drove side by side. I tried not to look over, but the pressure was unbearable. When I finally glanced left, my blood ran cold. The cab of the truck was completely dark. No interior light, no visible driver. Just a black void behind the windshield. And the overwhelming sensation that I was being watched. The truck slowed slightly, not enough to fall behind. Just enough to drift back toward my rear quarter panel like a predator circling. My thoughts raced. I needed an exit, a gas station, anything. Then the truck surged forward. It cut sharply in front of me and slammed on its brakes. I barely reacted in time. My car screamed as I stomped the brake pedal, the tires fighting for traction. For a split second, all I could see were the truck's glowing red brake lights filling my windshield. We came to an almost complete stop on the highway. My heart pounded so hard it made me dizzy. The truck idled in front of me for several seconds. Then its hazard lights blinked on. Slowly, deliberately, the driver's window rolled down. A gloved hand emerged, black leather. The hand waved once, calm, patient, beckoning me to pull over. Every instinct in my body screamed no. The highway around us was dead. No passing cars, no sound, just the hum of engines and the wind slipping through the open land. I imagined pulling over, stepping out into that darkness, and instantly knew I wouldn't be getting back into my car. I shook my head even though I knew they couldn't see it. The hand waved again, slower this time. I made my decision. I swerved left and hit the gas. My engine roared as I shot forward, narrowly missing the truck's bumper. The pickup exploded into motion behind me, its engine growling deep and furious. The chase was on. I pushed my car as hard as I dared, heart slamming against my ribs. The truck closed the gap quickly, its headlights bouncing wildly as it gained ground. My hands trembled, but I kept my focus ahead. An exit sign appeared out of nowhere. I veered off the highway, praying for lights, people, anything. The exit ramp dropped into darkness. At the bottom, a single red traffic light glowed over an empty intersection. I skidded to a stop, chest heaving. The truck rolled up beside me, its headlights blinding. I stared straight ahead, afraid to look. Movement in my peripheral vision forced my eyes sideways. 3 figures sat inside the truck, all wearing white plastic masks. The masks were cracked and stained, their frozen smiles grotesque and wrong. Empty eye holes stared back at me. One of the men raised a hand and slowly dragged a finger across his throat. My blood turned to ice. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I ran the red light. My tires screeched as I tore through the intersection and back onto the road. I looked in the mirror, bracing myself for the truck to follow. It didn't. The pickup stayed where it was, motionless at the light. The 3 masked faces remained turned toward me, watching as I disappeared into the darkness. I didn't stop driving for another 50 miles. When I finally pulled into a brightly lit Walmart parking lot, my entire body was shaking. I sat there for a long time, replaying what had happened, trying to understand it. They hadn't wanted my car. They hadn't wanted my money. They hadn't even chased me when they easily could have. That's when it hit me. I wasn't a target. I was entertainment. They hunted fear. And that night I had given them exactly what they wanted. Now, whenever I drive alone after dark, I remember those masks. And I remember this truth. The road doesn't care how experienced you are. The night doesn't care how confident you feel. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can encounter on a highway is another human being. What stayed with me long after those nights wasn't just the fear. It was the realization that the road itself hadn't changed. The highways were still there the next morning. The signs were still standing. Cars still passed each other at full speed, windows up, music playing, lives continuing as if nothing had happened. But the people inside those cars had changed. Because once you've felt how thin the line is between an ordinary drive and something unthinkable, you never see the road the same way again. You start to notice how quickly help can turn into danger, how silence can hide intention, how a simple choice, slowing down, rolling down a window, trusting a stranger, can echo for the rest of your life. These stories aren't about monsters or the supernatural. They're about moments where instinct whispered before fear screamed. About people who survived not because they were fearless, but because they listened to that quiet warning inside them. Just in time. If there's one thing these roads taught me, it's this. You don't owe anyone your safety. You don't have to be polite at the cost of your life. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep driving. So the next time you find yourself alone on a dark highway, fog pressing in, headlights glowing behind you, remember this. Most nights end quietly, but the ones that don't are decided by seconds. Trust your instincts, protect your life, and never forget how precious it is that you made it home. Because not everyone does.